Leadership is hard. Titles change overnight, expectations pile up fast, and nobody hands you a survival map. That's why Leadership on the Rocks exists. Hi, I'm Bethany Reese, leadership coach, author, and speaker. And for 2 decades, I've been equipping leaders to navigate the wild, unpredictable terrain of leading people. Whether you're a new leader trying to find your footing or a seasoned leader trying to reclaim clarity, this podcast gives you the tools, truth, and encouragement you need to thrive in both your professional and personal lives. Each week, I sit down with leaders who have weathered storms, climbed mountains, and learned what it takes to lead without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to build steady, grounded, life-giving leadership, this is your place. Let's climb together.
People are crying today to be heard. I mean, this goes on not just at the workplace, for the work environment, and it goes at the homes, but there are people that are just, they're crying, first of all, when you listen to others, they appreciate the fact that you're listening. And I always said this, you learn a lot more by listening than by talking.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Stanford Slovin about the power of better listening, how mastering this overlooked skill can transform your leadership, strengthen your relationships, and even improve your decision making. Stan is a managing director and wealth manager for a large wealth management firm who, for over 30 years in the financial services industry, has worked with individual investors, families, business owners, corporations, and associations throughout the country, helping them personalize and customize with strategies and solutions in wealth creation, wealth accumulation, and savings and distribution. Stan was born and raised in Chicago, earned his BS in finance at Champaign-Urbana campus at the University of Illinois, and he holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Illinois Chicago School of Law. Stan spent 9 months on Capitol Hill in Washington working with a U.S. Senator. He's the author of Better Listening, The Secret to Improving Your Professional and Personal Life, which is a guide to mastering the art of listening, one of the most overlooked yet powerful skills in business and in life. And Stan is deeply involved in charitable organizations focusing on mental health, depression, bipolar disease, suicide prevention, and children with disabilities. He loves skiing, tennis, and enjoys traveling, and Stan plays, listen to this, in 2 rock and roll bands. I love it. Stan and his wife reside in the Chicagoland area, and they have 2 children and 2 mini golden doodles. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Stan. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Bethany, so much for having me on the podcast. I'm just excited about our conversation today.
Man, well, Stan, I have to say, not only are you a financial professional and author, but you also play in a rock and roll band. I mean, how much cooler could you be, sir? It's pretty awesome, the professional and personal mix that you have.
Well, the cool part is when your daughter tells all her friends, "Oh my God, my dad is so cool still."
Oh,
That's
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 amazing.
the epitome of being in a rock and roll band. Yeah.
Yeah, hashtag goal of parenting, right? When your kids think you're cool. But now, my number one question before we ever get started, I have family in Chicago. This is an important question to me. Are you a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan?
Ooh, that is the toughest question. First of all, I'm a baseball fan, so I played baseball my whole life. But I'm a North Sider, so I do love the Chicago Cubbies, and I love spending a nice afternoon or a weekend day at Wrigley Field. But I do care about the White Sox, and
Mm.
I'm also little just hope the Chicago teams will win. So
Absolutely, absolutely. You want the city to win. I get that. But as a Cubs fan
yes,
and diehard Cubs fan, they know this. I've actually talked about the Cubs a couple of times on this show about how much I've learned resilience through the lovable losers. But we did win in 2016, so I'm glad to know that. But yes,
yes.
also go White Sox. I will say that. I have some family members in Chicago that like them too. Well, we are not here to talk baseball, even though I probably could all day long because I love it as well. We're here to talk about how to be better listeners. And you, sir, are the expert. You have the book, Better Listening. So let's just start there because I want to start with defining that. What does better listening mean? Because obviously it's got to be different than what I and everybody else think that we're already doing. So what is better listening compared to just normal listening?
Yes, it's an area where I always start by saying like we're all good listeners, because if I said we were all bad listeners, then no one would buy the book. Okay. But we're all good listeners. The fun part is that we can really all be better listeners. And why that's so important is today, especially, there are so many moving pieces going on, whether it's, cultural, political, religious, your home, your work. So many things are going on where we're just in this responsive mode. Everyone is just responding. They're listening to respond versus listening to really
Mm.
understand. And that's something, and it ties right to leadership as well, is that one of the most biggest struggles is that it's such an area that can be defined as, well, I thought I'm a good listener, or I'm trying to be a good listener, but a lot of times we're just, we're just not letting people empty their buckets. We're really spending too much time cutting others off, or we're actually sometimes just thinking about what we want to say while the other person is still actually even talking. And those
Guilty.
little and guilty also. And my wife will tell me that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you know what, you wrote the book. You need to be a better listener. But it's really something that's important. And that's really where the book kind of stemmed from, and that is, to one, have just more improving communications, which is what we're all trying to do, but also we're just trying to enhance, our dialogues and to create more of an impactful conversation. And in order to do that, we kind of have to like rethink how we're listening so that we could all be better listeners, so we could all, enjoy a more meaningful conversation.
Oh man. I mean, what you just said, I want to hone in on. You said enhance dialogue
Mhm.
and then have an impactful conversation, like impact. Enhance dialogue and impact. Dialogue, I mean, this is something that I know, but I can also struggle to do because I'm guilty of what you just said. My mind just goes a million ways and I can cut people off, but dialogue is a two-way street. It is not just me, the sage on the stage in the conversation. It's a give and a take. It's both people engaging. So can you dive in of just how do we even set the stage for having dialogue?
Right. Well, this stems from going way back when we were little kids. We were not good listeners. When little kids, in fact, if you remember, your teacher says, "Well, if you just followed the directions, you would have done better." Or a lot of times we would be at the kitchen table and we were told, "Listen, don't talk until you're, spoken to." And we would be just wanting to jump in. But generally speaking, when you think about it, people are crying today to be heard. I mean, this
Mm.
goes on not just at the workplace, for the work environment, and it goes at the homes, but there are people that are just they're crying. They, first of all, when you listen to others, they appreciate the fact that you're listening. And I always said this: you learn a lot more by listening than by talking. In fact, Larry King, famous interviewer, said, "I've never learned anything by me talking, so I might as well
Oh,
just like stop talking and be a better listener." And we think about it, what I forgot the philosopher, we have, two ears and one mouth. There's a reason for that,
mm,
and as opposed, but yet a lot of times we forget that and we think we have three or four mouths and maybe only sometimes one ear. So others feel hardcore that either you're trying to hear them, or that that you're actually sharing empathy, which we'll talk about hopefully later in. But empathy is the key difference of just active listening and reflective listening. We have to add more empathy so that we can allow others to empty their bucket, so we go deeper in the conversation, and then our conversation are not just response modes. I mean, think about it when you're with your friends. Have you ever realized it gets louder and louder and louder and louder, and everyone's jumping in, jumping in, jumping in to, you're competing to be heard. And yet we're just really just trying to have a meaningful, impactful conversation and dialogue.
I love it. So I heard you say empty your bucket twice now. Can you, I mean, I love visuals. So I'm literally picturing I'm in front of somebody that I want to engage in dialogue with and they have a bucket full of water. So what do you mean by empty their bucket?
Well, emptying your bucket is changing the narrative on the conversation. Most people are used to saying something and they respond. And then they go to the next thing and they respond. And that's called surface conversation. And that's really what the majority. And that's why really people feel that they're not being heard, or they're not being understood, or they're not being valued, like at work. Letting a person empty their bucket means going that next step, that next layer. So there's a process. The first thing is, before you even think about going in and responding, you got to pause. So once you pause and you're listening to that person, the next thing you want to do is you want to say to them, like, "Well, tell me more about that," or, "Well, how does that work?" Or, that's an interesting, fact or situation. What else? And what happens is the person now is allowed to go deeper than just a response mode, and you start actually hearing how they're feeling. And then once you have them start emptying their bucket or emptying the water bucket, visually speaking, then you can go even deeper and say, what, that's really important. And you're not alone. A lot of people, there's that empathy, but how does that make you feel? Or how did you have to react? Or what else? So think about it. You still have not responded yet. And the
Mhm.
person is now just sharing, and they're emptying their bucket because they feel comfortable, they feel confident, they feel that you're actually listening to them. And once they feel that, that whole conversation then changes. And oh, by the way, you then learn more as opposed to just their response. You're getting them to go deeper, emptying, and then they're then sharing their most important feelings to you. They feel comfortable, they feel confident, they feel safe. But if we don't let them get to that next level, if we never let them get there, then we're never going to be able to let them empty their bucket. And that's where the conversations get very short.
Man, I feel called to the carpet, sir. I feel like how many service level conversations am I having with others where I'm just staying surface level because I'm not, you immediately gave examples of asking questions. And so staying curious is what came to my mind of, am I truly curious when I'm talking to people? You know, it's first capturing, and this is my internal thinking, first capturing my thoughts to shut up, Bethany, listen, and now ask questions to learn more to keep it from being those surface level conversations. It's so good. So thank you for explaining empty your bucket. It's so good. And you've mentioned empathy so much. So let's dive into that. If I am having a conversation with someone and I start by asking them a question so that they talk, and I keep asking questions so that they can empty their bucket and go deeper, why is empathy so important in that process?
Well, before I answer, let me ask this: empathy is a big area. So when you're asking, like, what specific,
Ooh.
like, help me understand that more.
So let me ask you this then. I feel like we're going to play ping pong with the what do we mean by empathy? You're exactly right. You're the expert in this area. So what working definition should we have of empathy?
Right. And that exercise that we just did, that helps me understand is what's kind of like the definition, as opposed to like the general area of empathy. I've actually learned a little bit more of like kind of where you want to hone in more into just by asking a clarification question and reflecting a little bit. And to go to empathy, it is really the feeling of that most people, okay, because empathy is the feeling that you care, that you are listening, that you want to be helpful. Empathy is, hey, you're not alone. Okay, this is something that happens all the time. I've gone through this. Okay, I see this happening, in the workplace. It's not something that you have to feel that you're embarrassed by or that you can't talk about that. So you put the person at ease by sharing empathy statements or empathy kind of words, so that you're
Mm,
allowing that person to say, "Hey, you know what? Oh my gosh, this is great. He not only is he or she listening to me, but they want to know how I'm feeling." And I feel safe about that. And they're saying that I'm not alone. So I can feel that I'm not embarrassed or that I'm not the only person, or maybe there's something wrong with me. So empathy adds into the conversation it's a trust. It's a trust factor. And once you have the trust factor from your listener, so let's take a simple example. You come home to the dining room table. Okay. I had a person that read the book and said, Stan, I'm a CEO. I read the book, and yes, there's some cool stuff in there, but here's my story. I came home, my daughter said to me, Dad, I had a really bad day. Things are going pretty tough. And one of my friends is giving me a hard time. And the dad said, I was about to give her an answer when I said to her, hey, you know what? That's okay. I've gone through that. And by the way, that's very common. We don't all have great days. And sometimes our friends can be, but tell me more about that. Let me hear about that. And she opened up and she shared with him for the next, 10, 15 minutes. And he said, okay, let me ask you this. What else is going on? And she then went on to tell that she really, really had a very strong desire to improve the friendship, but it was very difficult. After 20 minutes, she gets up, she looks at him, she says, Dad, thank you for finally listening to me.
wow.
So
Wow.
that's a powerful turnaround for your leaders in your companies. Emptying a bucket is not an hour, 2 hour conversation. It's just giving that very quick, that concise understanding that, hey, I understand where you're coming from. This is important to you. I want to hear more about that. You're not alone. And that empathy changes a conversation to the most impactful, engaging narrative. And it's going to help your leaders have a better understanding where their employees are coming from. The employees are going to be happier, more productive, more profitability, more retention. The environment is going to be better. And that leader has to know that they can't be just a good listener, but a great leader is a great listener. And they have to start implementing more empathy.
Oh man, I feel is talking about empathy. You're making me feel safe enough to share like on this podcast how much I've struggled with some of those things. So often you can look at, I am so busy, I just need to get tasks done, done, done. And I hate to say this as a confession, but sometimes my kids can just be on my to-do list, right? How was school? Do you have your homework done? Asking these surface level questions to check, 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 check the box, then get to dinner, then, the rest of the evening. And by you calling us out on that and sharing that amazing story, which I'm so thankful you've made it safe for that gentleman to share with you, that CEO, we've got to have that empathy. And it takes so much of me stopping to my own agenda and not being selfish in my time and then being soft with that empathy of saying, man, I'm sorry you've had a hard day. I've had hard days too. And then asking to go deeper, tell me more. Like those are just all the things swimming in my head of I got to capture, my own
Yeah,
my own agenda in that. I love it that you're calling us out to that because it's so important. We don't even
so
realize it. It's not that
important.
I'm a bad parent.
Yeah.
I just don't realize
No,
it.
no. Bethany, it's funny. I hear this all the time. You come home from work and your spouse, your partner says to you, I just want to tell you, and they start talking about their day or something's going on. And
Yeah.
we just naturally put on our super cape of solving. It's the super
Hmm.
solver cape. Oh, let me tell you, let me, and they want to, basically pontificate and they want to share, what that person should do. When in reality, that person just wanted you to listen to them. So I get
Hmm.
this question all the time. Well, how do you know if they want us to just listen or do they want us to give input and maybe observation and some suggestion? And the best solution is ask them. When they share with you next time you come home or next time you're at work or someone comes in and knocks on the door and says, hey, can I talk to you? And they're just about to share, before you put that super cape of solving on, listen to them and say, hey, listen, there's a lot going on. And I'm hearing you. Do you want me to just listen and kind of just let you, share what's happening? Or would you like my observation or my input? You tell me.
I feel
And
like you just
that
gave me a cheat
is
code. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. But that's it. But you brought up something about reflecting. We're talking about pausing and empathy. There's
Mhm.
a five step, and I can share just real quick, five
Yeah.
quick steps in 30 seconds, you could knock them out. When you're in a conversation, and I say this for your leaders and not only just for employers and employees, but this is for at home, for parents and children, for siblings, adult siblings, for, it doesn't matter. It works all over. When you get into a conversation and a dialogue, pause for a quick second before you respond. Just pause for a quick second. Take a quick second, and then before you respond, push the response mode down and reflect. Reflect first. Make sure. So it sounds like, or it feels from what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, and let that person come back to you and confirm. Because so many times we think we're hearing what they're saying or talking about, and we're not reflecting. And reflecting is not parroting. You're not a parrot back. You're reflecting in a conversation. So it sounds like that you're going to make a change in your job. Or, hey, it's, what I'm getting the feeling is that you're not comfortable with this project that I put you and assigned you to in terms of the time frame and the details. And they're going to come back and say, yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling, but I'm a little bit nervous of coming and talking. No, no, tell me more about that. Get clarity. So the next step is clarity. Pause, reflect, and then clarify. Tell me more. Help me understand. It sounds like, that's a big area. Can you hone in on a couple more? Or what else? Simple phrases for clarity. And then add empathy before you respond, because people want to respond after they clarify. They're like, okay, I got it. I hear you, and I know what I'm going to respond, but just pause for a second, hold back, add empathy in there, get them to know that you're understanding how they're feeling, ask them a little bit more, check in, and then respond, because now it's a whole new response and a whole better understanding. And then when you're sharing their response, now you're sharing it with one, the listener has a better feeling to you, and two, you have a better understanding of what's going on. So that's like a quick little 5-part test.
I love it. And guys, I'm going to put those in the show notes just so you can look back and have that visual of those steps. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. And also, please rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership. And through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. Now, back to the show. Whenever I was talking about a cheat code earlier, everything that you're saying, I told you, one thing I revealed is I don't even recognize how quickly I am trying to solve problems or get the task done, right? And you just gave us the steps that start with pause, and the cheat code, and you just explained it even more so, is I don't have to make quick snap judgments about what's going on. I don't have to make that quick judgment about what the actual problem is and then give you the solution and then go on to the next thing. And the cheat code is I can ask a question to learn more. I don't have to figure it out. How much brain space are we using to figure out what is the person really saying? How are they feeling? What does this mean? How's this going to scale into the, effects of the project or the whatever? Just stop and ask. Just
Right.
pause,
Simple.
reflect a minute,
Pause.
ask a question, and then have empathy when you respond. Like you just went through it. It's like the cheat code of saying, I don't have to own all that mental turmoil in my head. Think about the stress levels we have trying to figure out all this stuff when we could just pause, reflect, and ask. I just, cheat
Well,
code.
that's the cheat code. I mean, the cheat code on reflection, by the way, is humility.
Mm,
Because when we're reflecting, okay, it is the first time that we are stopping ourselves from responding and changing the narrative from us to them. It's not about us in the conversation. This is a big humility check-in with everybody. Okay, this is about them. It's being considerate, it's being respectful, it's also being in the presence. When you're in a conversation, so many times, active listening, they have thousands of books on active listening. Don't look at your phone, stop paying attention somewhere else. Why are you watching the TV when I'm talking to you? Or when you go to a networking or a wedding and someone comes up to you and you start looking at someone else when they're still talking to you. I mean, it happens all the time. Active listening are those cues and that eye contact. Reflective listening is kind of like what we just talked about, those 5 steps. But when you put empathy in between active and reflective, you now have total listening, that's the differentiator of good leaders to great leaders. All of your leaders on your show tonight that are listening, they're very successful. They've done very well. Okay, but if you poll them, a lot of it is based on their agenda, what they're trying to achieve, and you have to have a certain amount of that. But if we just take a little bit of those good leadership skills and turn them into a great leadership skill, okay, that's where you get the definition of a good environment, people wanting to come to work. There's a great book called Good to Great.
oh,
Okay. And there's a
yes.
chapter in that book that talks about likability. Now, not all leaders are likable. They're not, and nor do they have to be. But the greatest leaders have likability. People want to work with them. They want to be in their presence. They want to work on those projects. They want to do well for the company. They like what their environment. And the only way to get that is allowing those people to be heard, their voices to be heard, to be valued, to be validated, to actually know that they have something to add to, and they are being told that or being, shown that, and that's how great leaders communicate better.
Man, the amount and level of, and you called it out, humility and just emotional intelligence of recognizing, what's happening. It's almost like being a meteorologist. Can you tell the weather of the room and then know what to do? It's so good. So I'm just curious. This is just me asking because you're a finance guy, you're a numbers guy, and here you are talking about trust and listening and empathy. Like for the most part, most of the numbers based people I know, they're not doing well in this area. How in the world did you come from an analytical, financial, numbers spreadsheet, professional background to understanding trust, listening, empathy, all of these things that you're telling us that we need to move from just being a good leader to a great leader?
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes it has to hit you right in the face. And I
Mm.
think the first 10 years of my industry, I was telling everybody what they need to know. I'm giving them advice. They need to listen to me, and I'm going to tell them how to do it. And then all of a sudden I realized I was doing it all wrong. I heard on a stage at a conference, the person said, all of you in this room are horrible listeners because you're not finding out what is most important to them. It's all about you. You're not finding out what keeps them up at night. You're not letting them go deeper and share with them. And I thought to myself, he's right. And I wasn't. And I really committed at that point, the last 10, 15 years, to make sure that I would learn more about, value more what's important to them, not us, and realize that our industry, the professional services industry, if you look at the surveys, the number one reason why people leave their insurance, their financial, their lawyer, their accountant, any service is not because of performance. It's because the person feels that the advisor is not truly listening to them and that they
Mm.
are not thinking that their best interests are at the advisor's heart. They don't feel that. So it's
Yeah.
not the performance. And when you see that, it comes back, and that is it's a pandemic of an issue. We are not, we need to be better listeners so that we can help society
Mhm.
be a little bit calmer, be a little bit more communicative. There's a great I forgot the stat that if you have a strong view, and you get into a conversation, the other person is not going to convince you to change your view. Okay? They're not. And here's the
Yeah.
funny thing is, they're not going to change their view because of you. So if that's the case, instead of having the bucking and just all the time going like this, we should step back and say, okay, whether you have your opinion and your comments, let me hear and open up the conversation and the dialogue so that we can all be invited back to the Thanksgiving Christmas dinners.
You just solved years and generations of family problems. Don't take offense. Just be open and listen. I love it so much. It's so good. So as we look at becoming better leader or better listeners, yeah, and better leaders, what do you think is one of the first steps? If we could just really put a pin on it as everybody's listening, what's one of the first steps of how do I get started with being a better listener?
I think you have to ask yourself, am I willing to try something different that I'm so used to doing
Mm.
the other way? The second thing is sometimes we don't know that we're not a good listener. Sometimes we just are hijacking conversations and we're not realizing it. Okay, sometimes, how many times do we come home and say, like, you're just not understanding what I'm saying. You're not listening to me. You just don't get it. Okay. We hear those comments quickly from our friends and our loved ones, and sometimes even at work, and we see ourselves, what are you talking about? I'm educated, I care. And yet we realize it's not about caring or education. We're not
Mm.
listening. We're
Yeah.
missing. We're missing. And by the way, when you're not listening,
Mhm.
you also affect on how that person views you, and they'll stop talking. In fact, so many relationships, you'll notice you get a person that's just a bully talker, a loud talker, a verbose, an overbearing. And you start seeing that the people around them just stop talking. And when they try to talk, they get cut off. And sometimes
Mhm.
we don't even realize we're doing that. So we have to be, and I said this to you early before, sometimes we're even not even giving the consideration that while the person is talking, we're thinking about what we want to say next. So the beginning would be is to try to realize, hey, listen, maybe if I can maybe cut off people a little bit less, maybe if I don't try to hijack a conversation so quickly. In fact, try this next time. I encourage all your listeners, next time you're in a group of friends and someone says something and you are about to respond, don't. Let them keep going. Let the conversation flow and be a more of a, it's not an audience person. It's just being a better listener. The other thing is this, some people by nature, especially leaders, like to take over the conversations. And that's a tough one. And one of the ways to start reversing that is start involving other people more and ask yourself at the end of the hour, did I talk 30 minutes, 40 or 50? Or did I only talk 5 or 10 or 15 and let the rest of the group talk more? Try that in your next staff meeting. That instead of going around at the end and saying, is there anyone else want to add? Let them start. And maybe you at the very end only have a few minutes. So those are ways that you can try to start little changes.
And you have given us some homework assignments. I love it. The first one is, again, it doesn't matter the conversation you were talking about, even with friends, and you feel like you want to respond, immediately capture that and pull it back in and let the conversation keep going where you're listening and not talking. So important. And then as you were explaining how to bring other people into the conversation in meetings, you know who I thought about? I thought about my husband. He is so good at this, and he's a leader in supply chain. And he's so good at letting other people talk first. And then at the end, he'll give like a quick, thought or summary or action or whatever it is. But it's so funny the dynamics of our personalities and our relationships and how we show up at work and our leadership. But this was a couple of years ago. And I remember we were having a conversation, well, a one-way conversation because I was dominating it. And he looked at me and
Mm.
he said, I am not your student. You are not my administrator. Like, stop talking to me like the power of
Oh.
authority, you know? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that in my role professionally, I did have more authority to take over the conversation. I shouldn't have. Let's just start there. You're already calling me out on that. But then that even carried over into my marriage relationship where I continued that.
Sure.
And now I've got to recognize it in both places of saying, I'm not there to dominate. I'm not there to tell people what to do. I'm there to listen, understand, ask more questions. Love talk, listen, understand, and validate.
Hmm.
I learned that in a marriage
Yes.
conference a long time ago, and it just now came back to me. I've not been doing a very good job of that. And so thank you
Yes.
so much. You've identified so much of how we're not good. Well, you said we're good listeners to begin with, but we want to be great listeners. And that really starts
Mm.
with just that pausing and in my head, what I'm saying is shut up, Bethany. That's really what I'm telling myself. Not
Right.
because what
Well,
I
yeah.
what I'm thinking isn't valuable, but just shh, be quiet.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you're saying supply chain, and again, I know a lot of your listeners today are leaders in corporations and companies. Whether they're
Mhm.
small, medium sized, or part of large corporations, and a lot of times they're involved in new projects or new customers because, like,
Mhm.
again, most of us are we're trying to find new relationships, new business, and everything like that. And in our first meeting, we're trying so hard to share how valuable we are and what we can do for them and how we can accomplish and solve. And what happens is at the end of the first meeting, you get that information out, but I'll share a great question that all of your leaders can add to their thing. And that is in their first meeting somewhere, add this question. So it sounds like that this project or this event that we're working on or this opportunity, let me ask you this. What's most important to you with regards to working with a supply chain expert? So I'll use your husband as an example. I didn't say
Mhm.
your husband's name, I didn't say his company, but I just said generally, if we're going to do this project, what is important? What's most important to you with regards to a relationship with working with and fill in the blank? And what that person is going to say to whoever is interviewing for that new project, new business, new event, whatever you're working on, they will say, well, what's most important is communication and timeliness. And you want to just jump in and say, well, let me tell you how we communicate, or let me tell you how we finish it. Don't pause, take those 5 steps and say, well, so when you say timeliness, because obviously you've done projects before, help me understand that. Can you go? And they will specifically tell you, in the past, we've had this problem. Here's what we're looking for. Our budget only allows this. And now you've just learned. And then before you then start talking about your wonderful things, this is for all your leaders, ask them, okay, in addition to timeliness, what else? Well, another thing that's very important to us is communication to not only the top level, but down. You say, well, the top level and down level is again, very big area. Tell me a little bit more. And they'll go through that. And now you have 3 of their most important things to them, and you will get that project 80% more of the time because they will realize that you have come back in a proposal with those 3 most important, not what was important to you, but was most important to them. And you came back, and that proposal reflects that. And that says to them, you were listening to us.
Man. Stan, and that just feeds into exactly what you told us. By asking those questions, you're going to gain more clarity, right, on how to serve better. It's all connected, people. It's all connected. And I want to note, Stan, before we came on, before we hit record, right, anytime I interview a guest, we usually have like a pre-conversation before we get into the actual podcast interview. And the first thing Stan does when he gets on here is ask me all these questions about, what's my goal with the podcast? I mean, you were just asking such great questions. I felt immediately safe and, like, man, he is really out to serve my audience. It was so good. And you put me in that place of ease. So you were living out exactly what it is that you're helping us live out to become the better
Oh my
leaders,
God.
the better
Thank you for those
listeners.
kind words. Thank you so much. Thank
Oh,
you.
it was so good. So, Stan, thinking of all of this, how to be a better listener, what are some key takeaways for our listeners that they need to apply and grow in their leadership? So, you've given us so many wonderful examples. So, can you just kind of put a bow on it, a recap? What's a key takeaway for our listeners?
Well, the first recap is to try to be a better Cubs fan for all of you out there. Okay.
Yes, I love
That's the
it.
first thing. Okay. No, I think the recap before kind of honing in on what we talked about today is it all comes down to attitude. It comes
Mhm.
down to still having that positive attitude, having patience, having compassion for what you're doing, having empathy, which we talked a lot about. That's a really key thing. If there was one good circle back, is to try to add empathy a little bit more. And by the way, if someone's going to say like, well, Stan, I'm just not an empathetic person. I'm just not. That's not the point. You can still have empathy in your conversations, whether or not you're an empathetic or non-empathetic person. Okay. Remember, it's not about you. It's about
Mhm.
them. The other recap is to be more tolerant. In our society today, we don't know why people are doing things, thinking of things, acting like they are. We're so quick to respond, okay, as opposed to stopping and pausing to instead of response mode, more of understanding. And that comes to being more tolerant and less judgmental. It doesn't mean that we can't make judgments on our both personal and professional, but let's maybe be just less judgmental on others because we don't know what's going on in a lot of people's worlds in today. Okay. So my recap would be is again that pausing, that reflection a little bit. We talked empathy, ask some better questions, let people empty their bucket. I will tell everyone today, it will game change not only your professional life, but your personal life. And they'll appreciate you more. And then you'll be happier for doing it.
Man, you've just given me so much to think about and process, but also I feel so much hope in being a better everything, being a better person in general, being a better leader, being a better wife, being a better mother, being a better friend. This is going to impact every single area of not only my life, but all of the listeners out there. And so I just thank you so much for the work that you're doing and giving us all of that. But now I want to ask you the opposite question. You've given us all the things that we need to do to pause, reflect, have empathy, ask questions, and we'll gain clarity on where to go from there. But what's one poor decision you would warn us to avoid? Like, okay, people, we've talked about all these wonderful things you should be doing to be better listeners, but don't do this one thing. Like, avoid it. What's one poor decision we should avoid?
This is what my family members, my daughter and my wife will tell me, my son. Um, really try hard to not cut people off. That's really a poor decision. It doesn't mean you have to let people go on for hours and hours and hours, but be respectful to others, not just from an active and reflective and empathetic, but sometimes people need to talk. They need to vent. And the poor decisions that we make is it's not just hijacking or not paying attention or not, it's cutting people off because they just don't like that. And they may tell you that or not, but it definitely affects relationships both at business and at home. And then the
Absolutely.
second thing that from a poor decision, I would say, or try from not making a poor decision, and that is give yourself enough credit that you're trying. Because this, although it sounds like a generic topic, this is really crucial, not only for your personal well-being and your mental well-being and your physical well-being, but for your spiritual well-being. And listening goes back to the beginning. Okay. When we said, "And God said," well, if he said or he said, someone was listening. Okay.
Uh,
So it goes way, way back. So be patient with yourself, be humble, be grateful, be appreciative that you're
mhm.
trying to be better and allowing others to share with you, but it doesn't always work. And if it doesn't work at the beginning, keep working on it. Make small strides, and you will find that again, you'll change the narrative forever in your life.
So good. Now I have a new prayer request. God, help me. Help me be a better listener. Why not add that in my prayers as well? Right? Can you imagine how much that'll help me make
Yes.
progress? All right. So, Stan, where can our listeners go to learn more about you? Where can they grab a copy of your book, Better Listening?
Oh my God, this is the book. It's simple. So it's not 700 pages. Okay, it's a fast read. As
Love
many
it.
of many people that have read it have sent goes, God, this is a fast read, but there's so much in there. So it's called Better Listening. You can go on Amazon, Better Listening. You can go to betterlisteningbook.com. And I love, really, truly love if you get a chance to read, pick one or two nuggets, anything out of there. And if you pick one or two nuggets and you like it, please let me know. I'd really appreciate that. And Bethany, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be on. This was great, great questions, and thank you for letting me just open up the dialogue to this area. But I hope it was helpful for everyone today.
And Stan, the work you're doing is so important. It's going to make impact in every area of our life. So thank you so much for teaching me. I feel like I'm going to listen to this episode again just to soak it all in. So thank you so much for the work you're doing and keep helping us grow to be better listeners. All right, guys, until next
Thank
time,
you.
continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9b. Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.